Welcome or welcome back if you are part of this little space often. Um, I hope that we can hear me. The light says we can. Yes, yes, sweet. Lovely, wonderful. It is a full moon, or going to be, not today, obviously, because I'm never this early. Um, but I guess that's because the more I open myself to it, the more intense it gets. So I suppose it worked out in such a way so as to give me a little breathing room myself, or to find that room to breathe, to find that equalizing axis of breath, which is very ironic and very important. The full moon will be on Saturday, um, and it will be in a very mature placement of Aquarius. And not alone, mind you, but with Pallas Athena and Pluto, which is also very interesting and will be a reoccurring theme. Not just because Pluto is such a long journey, such a broad perspective, such a bigger picture of things, but it is also retrograde. And Pallas Athena, or Athena in mythology, is not just this feminine warrior, but also hearth and home. Also, in that, a little bit of war, a little bit of tenderness, a little bit of um, perhaps more so than just those two deviating points, the uniting respect to the two and the things in which we do strive for. Um, strive and survive and move and live for, rather than fall to stagnation or strangulation of the self and seek death, I suppose. Um, as far as space and time move, opposed of this full moon in mature Aquarius is the Sun in Leo, which is an interesting axis. Also with Mercury, also in retrograde, which Mercury retrograde in Leo, and with Leo in the Sun in this very spotlighted energy, um, can feel fearful or can feel exciting. I do think that in this case, Leo is perhaps a performer, and any performance can be uh, conjuring in some way, shape, or form. Any performer will tell you that they feed off of the energy that they're given in performance. Any sensitive, I suppose, or adept um, would tell you, I think, as well, that experiencing a show can be very ritualistic or very ritualized. It's not just the ones that are coming out and saying it, but it's very much the modality in and of itself. And so, in that, with the Sun in Leo and Mercury retrograde in Leo, there's very much this bite your tongue essence to it, but also, are you running your mouth? There's a happy place in between those things where we're not biting our tongue and silencing ourselves, and where we're not just running off at the mouth, talking all kinds of nonsense. This occurs as a byproduct of an imbalanced heart chakra. And that very much comes with all of the modernization and mainstream being like, open your heart chakra, but having really no understanding of the actual mechanisms within that blueprint, and the anatomy of the heart, even the lobes of the heart and its innervations, and how that expands before it contracts and raises. This is something that I walk people through in my decolonize your mind class course, because there is a significant amount of time in which we can go through these processes, understand them, and work with them. So if everything that I'm saying is brand new to you, do a little research, do a little Google search of tantric maps of chakras, and you'll find that there's much more than seven, and there is a reason for that. 7 is just the physical body, and that's a lot like stock with no emissions test. um, Saturn is retrograde as well in Aries. Neptune is retrograde in Aries, which is interesting because I had this thought the other day because I read something about Bill Gates teaming up with BlackRock to further his empire of resources, really. He's in the past very much been a key player in land grabs. But also teaming up with BlackRock is branching out into water resources and water ownership. And something about the CEO of Nestle, which we all know is not an ideal entity. And interestingly enough, buying up land is also maybe keen points of buying up water tables in the under the surface of the earth. So what is it this man is after? With Neptune retrograde in Aries, it feels a lot like he thinks he's fucking Poseidon, and he's just like taking advantage of that ego. If you care about that kind of information, the article that I'm talking about was Bill Gates, titled "Bill Gates Quietly Seizes Control of U.S. Water Supply," and was published the 28th of June in 2025. So not that long ago. And there's obviously a lot more, well, maybe not obviously, there's hopefully a lot more resources about it, but it seems you have to dig. Do not be misled by your search results and algorithm. Learn to search like a coder, learn to search like a developer, and learn to really devise search plans based off of key terms and, unfortunately, semantics for what people wrote off spiritualists for in talking about water. You can find ample research about scientists and physicists and what have you dealing with hydrogen bonds in water and its electrical components. What's the word I'm looking for? With Pikachu, conductivity. There you go. If you change your terminology to something as simple as ordered water rather than structured, or H3O2 is another one that's wielded some interesting results. But I digress. Pluto is also retrograde in Aquarius, the north node of our Earth in perspective is also retrograde in Pisces, which is interesting because we all are digging deeper, but so much more so than that. There's very much depths and elements of surprise and shadow elements. Pallas Athena is also retrograde in Aquarius, which is that hearth and that fighter spirit. The I guess feminine version of Mars, which is interesting given Mars's placement in Libra. Chiron is also retrograde in Aries. Pholus is also retrograde in Capricorn. All of these are going to be very important, but do not let all of these retrogrades shock and awe you because they are there for a reason. Mars in Libra, which I did just say, is interesting because Libra is so much more closely at home with Venus. So we have something a little antithetical, perhaps another opposition within the axes of planetary alignments, which suggests perhaps a strenuation in this bonding, or an attempt to obfuscate feminine power through semantics, through jargon, through distracting, through credentials, which goes back again to what I said about learning how to search like a coder or search like a developer, because you are playing a largely a semantics game, and because you are very much so going against odds of credentials, because so much of science journals are behind paywalls or claim peer review, but are also being paid by third party, same way mill certs work. there's always an interesting third party obfuscator. Da, 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 da. But also more so than that, what does beauty, which very much deals with Venus and Libra, what does what does beauty serve in your life? Not that it is meant to serve. How do you serve beauty? Do you see beauty as a distraction, or do you orient your perspective around it? And those are two very key ideas, right? But more often than not, we might see beauty as a weapon, not as a tool. And this is very much the phenomenon of, boss babe kind of ideas, but also the ways in which sensationalism takes over journalism and it does not actually do its job. Um, but also the ways in which, again, within that axis, are we more oriented toward or with perfection in mind, which is ultimately a fracture in perspective. It's a very clever ruse to instigate stagnation because we're constantly strangling ourselves for this idea of perfection. These are the ways in which maybe we're trying to attain beauty, but we're also boxing ourselves in. And that can be applied absolutely in so many ways, in the ways in which we create, in the ways in which we perceive art or beauty, but also the ways in which we perceive ourselves and what that perfection is or what that beauty is and upholds. And at the end of the day, I do think beauty should or lends itself more to upholding the idea of creation and the practice of love. So interesting again how we have these axes, and often that is not how we are defining it. We define it in a much more literal context or quality, and that may very well be why men don't dream in women, why men can't speak in that language. What a wonderful Meryl Streep moment. Um, but also why we find such disconnect in touch, even though we're so physically bound and attracted to it. I'm pondering. My thoughts build, they do. Um, this can, this placement, this Mars and Libra placement, as much as all of that is, can still provide perspective. It can provide new information if we uphold those central axes in a more integrated way, much like I just described. What was it? Uphold idea and creation and activity in playing and beauty, or whatever it is I just said. It's much harder to tap into it again. Um, da, 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 da. Leo in Aquarius gains awareness, but also makes me consider a dog chasing water. Um, if you've ever seen a dog at a water park or a Labrador with a spray bottle, then you know what I'm talking about. This uh, has many aspects to it. Not only does it speak to consumption in that way, this like kind of way, but also could it suggest dehydration? Is that why we find that again, even Labradors and water bottles are so attached to it? Is it a dehydration element that has us just sort of lapping up relentlessly, which ultimately, again, back to consumption, that's a key point in marketing is they make you feel like you are the problem and like they have the solution. They make you feel like you are dehydrated of spirit, of essence, of quality of life. And so if you buy this thing, you'll have more. If you do this thing, you'll have more. Da, 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 da. Rather than rather than if we were to play with this concept again with the dog chasing water and play with it as more of a tug of war, as a catch of release, as a fun reciprocal game of intention and intentional contact. The space in between that is all Aquarius. It is not the water, it is the ionization in the air between sifting waters. It's much like a waterfall. It abounds. And again, with this dog chasing the water sort of idea, we have these abounding movements, short jumps perhaps, but long leaps of ideas. Short jumps back and forth. Whack-a-mole has this short movement game, but it is an all-encompassing game or experience. And so, what ways do we broaden our perspective, but also hold steady to play, rather than again reaching toward consumption, um, or drawing in consumption, desperate because of dehydration of whatever element it may be in our life. Maybe that's jumping into relationships because you feel lonely. Maybe that's, I don't know, whatever ways we can do that. I mean, that's binging in a lot of ways. Cheat days on diets, binging in substance, and conversely, very much also ruled by binging is abstinence. And so we have very much a lot of people so focused on patterning that they find themselves within, like, taught between the axis of abstinence or indulgence. And both of those placements still give power outside, or like still give all your power to something outside of the self, or is still you seeking power through something else. Either way, you cut it. Um, Pholus is in Capricorn. Pholus is also retrograde. Venus and Jupiter are in Cancer, which begs us to redefine femininity outside the scales of Mars and Leo, which is, again, these obvious or tangible things, this sensation of talking over, or the ways in which, we've said that, women are to be seen and not heard, or that femininity even is to be seen and not heard, and the ways in which we deal with our creative ideas in that same, cis hetero patriarchal way of, seeking perfection and of withholding, progress, or work in progress kind of state. And very much guilty to that, absolutely. Which is why I try to convene with my paintings in such a way that I feel like they're speaking to me, or being given life, not by me, but in just being unearthed. Um, I am not the life bringer by being the painter. I am just playing with life, and allowing it to breathe on its own. Which maybe sounds kind of bonkers, but I think when you work with art in a devotional or like heart directed manner, then skill kind of falls uh, secondary, maybe not entirely to the wayside, but it can be more secondary than the feeling of it. And again, there's balance in between. I think that's why a lot of people probably don't like my art or some art, because it's so emotionally driven, or so symbolically driven, that it's not leading enough, it's not directing enough. And many times we're looking to art for uh, nutrients of beauty, nutrients of spirit, nutrients of, and again, we have this dehydration consumption idea around it, rather than invoking, rather than basking, rather than dancing with the spirit in and of itself. Um, all of this very much, I think, leads me to consider energy in a much more um, like compass driven kind of way. And within the medicine wheel, this energy absolutely speaks to me of west and north bound, as well as the axis, which the medicine wheel moves in an ontological way, in an ebbing and flowing ontological, teleological way. But if we were to consider the flow of those axes and it's carrying forward from west to north, and we have moving from memory, and we have moving through action. We have moving from that which we have seen before, we have moving from patterning, we have movement from habituation, um, or even, or again, just memory from the past, memory from the way things have been before, and the ways in which we move with it. Oftentimes we may have the best intentions, but we're still moving with the memory of the same system we're trying to relieve ourselves from in that movement forward. And so it naturally follows us. this is a huge part of shadow work. It's like Peter Pan and his shadow in the old movie. It jumps around and is back and forth and is, bouncing in between or top between these axes of seen and unseen and of part of him or not. And in at least one of my favorite movies, I don't remember seeing this in the Disney version, but there was a play action version, like a live action play version, where Peter Pan was played by, I'm pretty sure, a gay woman, tall, lanky, blonde looking lesbian. Although I don't know that for sure, I just always loved that aspect of it as a kid. Where Peter Pan grapples the shadow and sews it to him so that he's able to move in coherence with this memory. This is a key point, I think, in why people struggle with their spirituality, because they're so keen on like just the healed ancestors and just the healed aspects, and I can't handle the shadow aspects. Somebody had said to me, maybe when the shadow aspects are ready to come to the circle, like no, 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 they're already here. That's why things are the way that they are. The shadow aspects are very present in the circle. It's not a matter of whether or not they're ready to heal. It's a matter of whether or not you're ready to take that on. And 100%, the more we exclude that kind of energy is very much akin to the same ways that we're like, oh, I'm going to deal with them, my bad habit later. I'll quit this later. I'll open those emails later. I'll, do this and do the things that I need to do, or pay this off later, and postpone growth and postpone the things in which that we actually seek. Relief from these things. We keep postponing them, thinking that they're not ready, when in fact they're already very present and wreaking havoc. Because they don't know any other way to go. And as spiritually enlightened as people claim to be, they have no directive for them, because there's fear and shame and guilt around dealing with shadow aspects. Because again, we're caught in this binary of like, okay, I must become it, I must be just like it, or I must shit on it and never look at it in the eye. No, both of those, again, much like indulgence or abstinence, give it central power rather than you taking power back. And so the spiritual psychosis and spiritual bypassing absolutely fuels more bullshit, fuels more of these crazy cycles of the kinds of things that we don't want to see, simply because they are so blind to themselves and to light, seeking light, not realizing that they themselves are the very shadow that they fear. And it doesn't replace, it's not replaced by light just because you keep calling its name. Much like the Peter Pan aspect, and how we move with our shadows. How do we move when we are scared? What are the things that we cling to in those moments? And what lengths will we go to avoid or to confront those moments? That is equally as informing. For people that avoid their, the inner work, avoid their shadow work, avoid, self-reflection, avoid introspection, avoid the byproduct of their own consciousness, that is a comfort that they cling to, and a great length to go for stagnation. And so don't doubt yourself because these things seem hard. If that's a great length that you'll go for one thing, imagine what lengths you'll go for more, for better, for creation, for ideation. If those are the lengths you'll go to stay the same, imagine what lengths you'll go to change. Another major aspect of this is this interesting little femme warrior triad, this rock and roll rebel trio. R.I.P. Oz. with Black Lilith, not quite perfected, but very much integrated within Scorpio with Ceres and Vesta. No, with Vesta and something else. Let's see. Motherfuck. Let's pull it up. Sorry. I just want to be accurate. Black Moon Lilith. Yes. Black Moon Lilith, Athena, Venus. What's up? All right, we go back to notes. This very much is about what you are hiding, what you are running from, what is being allowed to hide. And those things are a very intimate relationship. Perhaps there's so many secrets in the world because we're also holding so many secrets from ourselves. Perhaps this is what gives the system power through its guilting and shaming and the same, again, puritanical Abrahamic system that we all really desperately need relief from, because that is foundational to capitalism and its amoralistic quality. In Scorpio, what are you hiding? And so, what is being allowed to be hidden from you? Ceres in Aries with Chiron is more akin to turtle or tornado or energies within that nature in Telugu or Solkian. Those are deeply opposite energies, and for a reason. This is why Aries are so interesting sometimes, because of these inherent opposites in a wider perspective. Thriving ratio response to the ways in which we read astrology. It is about balancing, and it is about how we spiral inward or outward from a stable point. It is about the ways in which, again, we move from memory and whether that causes stagnation or change. As Jung would describe it, the same circuitry that icosahedron geometry that I run through in the geometry of relationships can also be turned to the geometry of relationship to self, and as Jung would have it, would describe it as the positive, negative, and capacitor being your anxiety, your ambivalence, and your ambiguity, which is very much exactly where puritanical capitalism wants us, not knowing who we are or what our value is, and therefore we just whatever the fuck they tell us, which just is not working for us now, is it? This is not just time shifting. This is not just time in space. This is motivation. This is inspiration. And therefore, it is about our presence in space. Not even to be caught up in future, because presence will always promise you a patterning all its own. Carries on to Jupiter and Venus in Cancer, which is opposite Pholus in Capricorn, retrograde again. And so we have a very radiant and renegade feminine energy. Again, with that triangulating feminine warrior kind of energy. But is it waging war like the men before us? Are we still seeking validation in a patriarchal, puritanical system? Or are we healing with thine own blood? Are we feeding grace? Are we healing the battlefield? The battlefield? Are we fueling the battlefield? Interesting slip because of oil. Right? It's also very interesting to see because people are, again, going through their own hard times with spiritual bypassing. And it's interesting to see how many muggles are talking about spiritual psychosis as ways to sell themselves and discredit another. It's marketing, really, because spiritual psychosis is not something you're going to see in a TikTok where somebody is talking about their offerings. Spiritual psychosis is more like a mugshot from a crime of passion. Spiritual psychosis is more like trials of murder. Is more like when people snap. And they're very much led to their own spiritual psychosis as well by pharmaceuticals and substances. That's why all of the pharmaceutical companies budget in billions of dollars for lawsuits. But obviously, that's maybe a little bit more of my bias. Or maybe not. It's just something not a lot of people are ready to hear, to be perfectly honest. But I just want to really paint a picture for you. Like, we go around, again, these like muggles playing with cards go around talking about spiritual psychosis as a way to make themselves look better. And in reality, spiritual psychosis is psychotic breaks that lead to a lot of pain and hurt and violence. And a lot of times that's also upheld. A lot of times that's what people celebrate is, yeah, they murdered the right person. In which case, how's your spiritual psychosis going? Outside of that very vivid picture, consider how you are regenerating. Consider your role in generational regenerative work. That is a satiant, an equalizer to spiritual psychosis, because it will regenerate you as well as others. But it does take you to swallow some pride and humble yourself, and often to put your own needs not to the wayside, but into a puzzle of a bigger picture. And will often give you something else to consider or think about, a different perspective. Again, this is where maybe a humble Mars and Libra, who's not running his mouth or talking over, and isn't disillusioned by their own disdain to the roles in which they've been agreed to play, then they're able to see more clearly and transmute. And again, be able to regenerate their own energy and create generative healing work, generational generative healing work on the outside. That is the feeding of grace. And it is, in fact, working with your own blood. That's why I don't get down with ritual sacrifice, because most people have no idea what it means or what they're doing, but they are following along in the same survival tactics that play a role in the same system that they're trying to get out of. So how are we going to get out of the system when we're also playing by its rules? And out of context, in the same way that we tell people that they read the Bible, but it's out of context. There's a lot of people sacrificing chickens in a closet, calling it ancestral healing work when in actuality it's out of context, and is in fact doing more harm than good, because the animals are no longer making a sacrifice for us in that way. They are already going through enough. So consider the weight of your sacrifices and the sacrifices that have already been made by the things that you turn to sacrifice outside of yourself. Grow up and do it yourself and find some power in yourself rather than in scapegoating something else. Let me not piss anybody off. In transit, Saturn also begs a slower and steady pace. Patience may feel more like a painful sacrifice to some, especially if they try to bypass with sacrificing another or another, another or an other. Saturn in retrograde begs patience. If we move, if every move we make is aligned, then we are moving away from the patterning and into a new paradigm. And that will ensure that any empire or structure of validation surely falls. That is hard for me, even. I'm impatient with myself. I'm impatient with the world. Which is why I slow myself down. Which is why I enjoy the time that I save on worry when I turn to breath. The time that I save on worry, feeling rushed even, when I turn to breath. Because ultimately, it doesn't take that long. I feel like it takes me longer to smoke a cigarette than it does to do a round or two or three of breath work, which is also something that I'm reminding myself of. Though tobacco is sacred and helps spirits pass, sometimes the spirits need to sit. Sometimes I'm chasing those spirits out. So we find balance, we find equilibrium, rather than give any specific outside tangibility more power than we've already given it. Aquarius Leo axis is ideal and is idea, because Aquarius and Pluto are such mind-changing, paradigm-shifting ways of energy. You do not need to push. You do not need to pander to, and be wary of anybody that is. And that's not to say that they're bad people. That is to say that that's just the system that we know. Anybody that's doing this, for instance, is marketing to you. They're creating, they're trying to create a tethering of reliance in some way, shape, or form. That's what any freaking company does. That's why I don't do relationship and love readings as like a free offering, because that is not what we need to be worried about. That's the wrong thing. That's the same Facebook race, metaverse race to the root system. And I resent that entirely. I'm much more interested in people learning that they are loved, and in people learning to think for themselves and define that for themselves. You do not need to push, you do not need to pander to. Be confident with new ideas, and be confident in the face of unexpected information and your application of it. At the end of the day, our ancestors have been here before, and if we are not to just uphold tradition and to retell stories, but to reawaken and to reignite and to reimagine stories, then we will be able to move swiftly and surely with ancestors. But again, this will take an understanding and an acknowledgement of even the ones that you don't want to bring with you, because it's that very missed perspective, it's that blind spot that has brought us this far. If we're going to go farther, we need to integrate that. With that being said, this axis of Aquarius and Leo is far beyond just theory and practice. It is not just practice at all. It is very much a theory and a play. We can theorize, and this is maybe the heart of true scientific study. Is we have a theory and we play and we investigate and we question. And if we have questions, then we begin to assess and theorize about those questions. And you kind of always go for the weak leg in your experiment to then fine tune your research rather than just pick and choose and cherry pick the things that seem to suggest what it is that you want. That's not even practice, that's just doing what you're told. So the playfulness with a breaking of rules is required to really fully theorize and integrate those theories into practice. What is an angle to whatever it is that you face, whether that be in the mirror and in you, or an obstacle that you face creatively or professionally or otherwise in life? What is an angle that you have not considered yet? What is something you have not tried? And maybe you've considered it or just considering it now, but you have not given it room to breathe until now. Try it. It's like they say, the things that you're avoiding is often where your progress really lies, right? Keep in mind, please, that being justice oriented can also still be just subservience to the law. And I will say that again, being justice oriented, as great of terminology as that is, as great as that sounds, as much as that sounds like the kind of place that we want to be, being justice oriented can also still be just being subservient to the law. If we do not know where that word comes from or what it means, then we are doomed to perpetuate the cycle. It's a pattern. Simply put, it's simply the way in which things have been done before, the ways in which you have seen things to have been done before. So it must be believable. There's always a new way and a new route to try. There's always an under or unexplored route. Detours aren't all that bad. But being justice oriented for the sake of justice by colonizer language is just a pattern, is just what somebody has said it to be so. And so if that's what we're upholding, then we are upholding the very system that we seek to collapse. However, if we can define what law means, what those patterning systems are, and how that pattern moves, which again is the geometry of relationships and the geometry of self, is just a beginning illustrative and I guess kind of lecture way of identifying what these axes are and what these points are. You are an ohm circuit, you are a battery in that way, and it is not just positive and negative. It is in fact the capacity to hold and the ion channel exchange in between. Positive and negative is a farce. It's just, it's relative to the space in between. And too often are we so tied to those terms that we think we're a good person even when we falter, or that we think that we are inherently evil while we're still actively trying to do good. So sit with that and reconsider. If you think without a shadow of a doubt that you're a good person, I'm willing to bet. Don't trust. And if you often consider, if you consider that often the people that suffer from imposter syndrome or what have you. That those are often the ones that have more information, but there's so much doubt, there's so much shame, there's so much guilt. And that's again how we play into this puritanical capitalistic system of consumption. What was I saying? Patterning of the self, being justice oriented. Expanding on this, really. Too often do we mix up the meaning of tradition with the same meaning as dogmatic law. The same dogmatic law that we were opposed to, and that has obfuscated tradition or torn it away from us. How are we to heal when we are playing in the same Chernobyl soils, the same poison soils, the same poison wells that were so oppressive to us? That controls and seizes up the system and causes stagnation where there ought to be growth growing, and therefore the byproduct of consciousness in the winds of change. Again, along this axis of Venus and Mars, if movement is to be addressed, right, outside, especially outside of just your sun, moon, and your rising, your Venus and your Mars, your east and your west, your north and your south, these axes of whirlwinds that carry information. And just to reiterate, too often do people cling to tradition simply because it is what they've been told. And that is a problem. Tradition was about feeling. Even in a very literal way, the steps to dances, the ways in which indigenous people have danced. Yes, there are steps. Like, yes, there are, thematics that are very much holding of this energy. You're not going to dance like a windmill when you're trying to do like an earth spirit dance. But if tradition told you to do it, you'd probably do it, and that's the problem. Tradition was about your capacity to feel wholly and to wholly feel in the earth. Those things were created because they were inspired by wholeness and by connection and by an energetic reciprocity with the people that conjured them, rather than just being told what to do. And I get it. We have not been raised in a system that really asks us to think for ourselves. So when we're given a multiple choice, we feel safer. It's directive. But we're going to have to learn how to direct ourselves, or we'll be doomed to choose a side, and it will always be the wrong side. Let me not get too caught up. Along the axis of Venus and Mars of movement, east and west and north to south, and all of the ways in which we remember, honor, and create, as opposed to, again, Jungian triptych of anxiety, ambiguity, and ambivalence. That is what the system counts on, because we can be swayed in either way, and we'll create whatever it is that they want us to create. But if you are in counsel with your memory, in counsel with your breath axis and its ability to create, and your ability to move with that and uphold that and honor that and protect that, then party on. You'll figure your shit out. And it won't be easy, because thinking for yourself never is. You will often feel like the black sheep. You will often feel like the outsider, but that is exactly what is needed to shake up these narratives. That is why I do what I do, ultimately, for the troublemakers, for the odd ones out, for the scapegoats, for the ones that threaten the system because they bring a different perspective. That's why I also think I often call for you to, yes, sure, enjoy that I'm, learning and practicing my native language, but also what was yours. And I was thinking about it the other day, like in an ideal world, what kind of room am I creating if we're all learning different languages? But what a beautiful thing if we were all able to communicate regardless of language, but because we can communicate with feeling, because we're able to hold energy and transmit energy in such a way that the vibration, like the quality, the tone, says more about and conveys the message more so than just similarity of words or than just familiar words. You can also honor you at your worst by not hating yourself, by forgiving yourself, by understanding the circumstances of the self in that moment. A lot of times we are our own worst critic and think the worst of ourselves, and those are perhaps the things that, again, Black Moon, Lilith, Scorpio, secrets, da 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 da, all the things that I talked about before, are the things that we're shoving under the rug, that we're giving more power to, shadows because of shame, guilt, yada yada yada. But if we were to simply hold those things uh, and look them in the eye, perhaps you would understand, that you didn't pay this homie back because you were in a specific place, or you, I don't know, stole a crayon from somebody when you were a kid because of A, B, and C in your life. Again, we're not looking for excuses, but we are looking for understanding in the self in that moment, so that you can alleviate that consolidation, that constriction, that blockage of energetic current, of movement, um, of capacity for other connections, even, and allow yourself to expand beyond that limited perspective, which ultimately, again, is exactly where the system wants you. Because if all you can see is your own lack and your own failure, then you will continue in the process of consumption, uh, because of, what did I say? Because of dehydration, because of malnutrition, um, because of the ways in which you starve yourself of the very things that it is that you need. And I know that sounds really intense. I don't mean it to be like you're starving yourself. Shame on you. We live in a world that is a system built and designed to uphold that. So, what a radical thing, not to be gluttonous, but to not starve yourself of love for sake of guilt and shame. This alone allows expansion, and it feels like a new gravitational pull, strengthened perhaps by Atlas in the sky and strange anomaly below. Is that what Bill Gates was looking for all along? Who knows? Who knows? But I've rambled for quite a bit. I think more so than I have in a while. So we pull some cards. We pull some cards and we see where it goes. Yes. Well, that's not the way you're supposed to go. There we go. Interesting. I'm pretty sure. See if that comes up. Sorry, I'm talking to myself. I forget that I have a microphone and I'm not mumbling. Right? It's still on. Yes, it's still on. Lovely. Okay. All right, my friend. Much like we are hanging out together, and there are cards in between us. We're going to take 3 deep breaths together for the mind, for the space, and for the spirit, and see what presents itself and what we feel. Sorry, I should have told you. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Oh my God, I don't like that feeling. This fucking hurts. That very much hurts. You know how if you like try to, well, okay, this is interesting. Um, you can alleviate tension and like migraines, and also sort of induce a more sort of out of body meditation by lifting and sort of creating more space and where the atlas meets the skull or cranium, right? Um, but also, you can make somebody pass out that way. That's actually the proper way to choke somebody. Is you lift, you separate, and you constrict the major blood flow, airflow, major blood flow, not airflow. And it was very uncomfortable. There's a lot of tension in my jaw. It feels like very much the ways in which we're posturing, rather than allowing ourselves to see outside of ourselves, which fits very much in line with this opposition Sun Leo Mercury. And what did I say? Are you running your mouth, or are you biting your tongue? I get that same feeling too if I don't know. I think when I cry a lot, my jaw just gets really tense. Or when I salivate a lot, I guess. Uh, in which case, are you starving? Are you hungry? Are you hurting? And in what ways can we confront these things rather than avoid them? For as much as the initial, separation of the head from the body, you're not fully separating it. Obviously, you're just creating a little bit of weightlessness, similar to like the way you see people will like hold their partner's pregnant belly for like relief in the system for sort of weightlessness. Same principle, but you're looking for uh, relief in the mind and the body. I guess that would be in both, rather than a headless meditation. Um, that can also say a lot of stress. When we clench, when we resist, um, when we tense, there's like striation. And you'll see like when people get enraged, they'll get like veins busting out on their heads, or in their arms, or on their necks. It's striation. It's amped blood flow. Um, and quite honestly, a misuse of it, because that blood's not going to the heart. That blood's getting forced out of the heart, which is very interesting. And maybe that's very indicative of why it is that rage and aggression does not work, and why that it has greater impacts in the brain's capacity to be more understanding or compassionate in the future, because it is a muscle that we are not using, but we're showing all the other ones, right? Showing ass, showing off, um, uh, all of those things are not fun feelings. And it did feel like it was coming more from a place of insecurity rather than outright aggression, which can be even more chaotic, really, and even more unsure. And I think, again, kind of speaks to the spiritual psychosis of lashing out, or of flip switches, that are often what lead to lawsuits for violent crimes, um, rather than like a premeditated, like rage. And that is because of a loss of control, a loss of trust in the self, a loss of control of the body's own mechanisms, when we alienate ourselves from the body and the mind and the spirit. Um, Interesting. A lot of escapism there. And it's funny because I used to see uh, like shadows, I guess, around people that, especially when they were in the process of escapism in some way, you could see the separation of their spiritual energy in their body. And now they're very much like they are that. They've become that shadow, and so they don't see it um like around them. They've become the disembodiment, like a platonic form of their own disembodiment, rather than even uniting or integrating their shadow. So don't be that guy. Integrate your shit. Uh, integrate your shit, and don't bleed on nobody. Oh, interesting. Okay, go figure. Four of Cups, bottom of the deck, which is very much that overwhelm, which is very much floodgates opening as far as emotion. It's very much like all at once. It can be very irrational. It can be very intense and overwhelming. But this is also sacred waterfall. This is also sacred grounds. This is also how we honor our emotions, or do we let our emotions wreak havoc? And shying away from the bad emotions, or shying away from the bad memories, or the bad histories, or the bad ancestors, or the bad spirits, or whatever it is 100% not in honoring of emotion, because we cannot be in honor and integrity if we are selective about the emotions that we hold space for, or if we are selective about the kind of cognition that we hold space for, the kind of integration that we hold space for. You know, can't all be love and light, and it can't all be what you think perfection would look like. In fact, that's often the holdup, is because it, in fact, is perfect. But because it doesn't look like we thought it would, we negate it or we reject it and continue seeking perfection while we throw away perfection at the same time. While we throw away, natural inclination and fullness and wholeness, because we're seeking a cherry picking, or seeking a fragmented idea of self, or of presence, or of an environment, or what have you. Um, that's a hard one to digest too, because obviously in group circumstances, like, this isn't like you need to hold space for the ones that give you the bad feeling. Like, this isn't you need to hold space for abusers. This isn't you need to hold space for uh, people that make you feel unsafe, or to people that don't uphold, or aren't interested in the same kind of evolutionary justice driven practices as you are. However, can we understand where it is that they're coming from? um, does not mean you have to share space to be able to do that. And this is something that I talk about a lot with the idea of no contact, or being estranged from family, or being orphaned. Um, you can forgive without having to invite them back in. 100%, you can continue to. You can heal those wounds, in yourself with the best of intentions, and a byproduct of that will be that it heals the quality of your blood, the memory, the cellular memory in your body that does impact lineage before and lineage after. However, just like the immediate lineage doesn't need to be there, the past ones that are dead can be there, or physically. And the future ones, they're there in your imagination or what have you, but not there, not tangibly there. We can touch all of these things without giving them access to us. We don't have to physically, we don't have to scapegoat ourselves to to allow an integrative and all-encompassing understanding of self. I love that. You do not have to scapegoat yourself any more than you already have been by the system. Beep. Queen of Wands, Queen of Pentacles, Ten of Wands, all inverted. So this is a lot of internal chaos. This is a lot of internal perspective. Again, spiritual psychosis. But also ego. But you know, let's not throw around the terms. Again, we discussed the potent imagery and potent examples of it. But this is also a lot of ego and the ways in which people pigeonhole themselves and the ways in which people hide from their own falter because it is more detrimental to their ego than it is to anything or anyone else. And is in effect a form of hiding and suppression and repression. And so all of that energy just coagulates and stirs and knots and wreaks havoc on the body, wreaks havoc on the mind. Perhaps if there's something you've been avoiding or negating, you're starting to see it in your body, or starting to see it in the way that your mind is having trouble grasping or grappling with these things. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for the rage. Forgive yourself for raging in a raging world just to survive. And know that that shows great light to the equal heights and equal depths of your capacity for joy or capacity for understanding or compassion or healing if you let it. If you choose not to be at the farthest point on the axis and you choose to be a central point of balance. And this Queen of Pentacles is very much not just one way, not just one truth, but an amalgamation of. Dayupti is not truth as in there is only one. It is a geometrical reciprocating relationship. This is also what indigenous philosophies mean with right relationship. It's not right as in right and wrong. It's not right as in right or left. It is right as in the Platonic conception of information agreement, which, okay, we might save that for another thing, but there's a Platonic physics, there's Atlantean physics, and Matthias de Stefano definitely talks about this maybe in a better way than I could, or I guess have time for right now. But the triangle leads to the square, leads to various other Platonic solid forms, and creates dimension. I absolutely go through this, but just within a triangulation and just within the triangle and the square in geometry of relationships and geometry of self, so that you have a little bit more of an idea of what I'm talking about. But the key point here is that it is not right and left. It is not right and wrong. It is not good and bad. It is the agreement that these things come to that gives that expanse and direction, or that gives that sort of nodal point to compass to. But if you create that for yourself and understand that, then you can always create a different perspective and expand the pinhole, expand your pinhole, to be able to see beyond yourself and outside of yourself and within yourself and where those things come from. And again, get to define law for what it is and what it can be, not because of what you've been told it to be before. And in that, it becomes an offering. And I think that alleviates maybe even the FOMO idea of it. This Queen of Pentacles can be a lot like a gold rush. And if you go right, then you always wonder about left. And if you go left, you always wonder about right. And if you go right, then you always wonder if you're wrong. And if you go wrong, then you always wonder if you could have been right. Whatever it is. When in fact, the Queen of Pentacles and both of these vast directions are equally an opportunity. And that is when you begin to see the opportunity that is probability. And that is maybe a more particle physics, mathematics way of describing synchronicity or angel numbers. Okay. Ooh, everybody loves rose quartz for heart chakra healing, but have you fucked with green aventurine, or green stones in general? I guess I shouldn't say in general; it's very vague. Green sodalite, even. There's something else that's green that's good for alignment that I can't think of right now. But again, we have like the superficial quality of like pinks and reds for hearts, or deeper loaves. Again, that Cancer, that Pisces, that deeper waters, saturated waters of healing. If we are to go just a little bit deeper, just a little bit farther, even in breath work, the mechanism of your brain letting you know that you are running out of breath has its own fail-safe. That's why anxiety and lungs are so attached, because your own mental compression can make it feel like you're out of breath much before, well before you are physically out of breath. And conversely, forcing or pushing or pandering to in competition is how people end up with brain damage from breath work. I promise it's not dangerous if you're not a twat about it. And if you're not ruled by movement in a system that you are trying to get out of. Okay. Pull some numbers, because time and space are inseparable, much like we have cards in between us. And you are here with me, hanging out to breathe and to read. We'll take 3 deep breaths together. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Ooh, okay. Interesting. Completely opposite. Very happy-go-lucky sensationalism. But also, while this is all exciting, let's not forget this thematic of patience. And rather than be the directive Aries or a bull in a china shop, be more like Earth, be more like Turtle, be more like Turtle Island. And that has a different respect to time. There's days out of time that we are obviously coming out of. but it's slow movement, it's patient movement, it's the capacity for introspection in the way that a turtle goes into its shell. It's a capacity for stillness, even again, even in its more converse idea of whirlwind that Aries sits in. You can be the stillness in the storm and hold space rather than destroy everything. Interesting. Ace of clubs, two of hearts, 10 of clubs. The ace of clubs is calm, is stillness, is expansiveness in the breath, which even that last round of breathing, it's like I could feel the excitement, I guess, and like the rushing to breath or rushing to the end of it, rather than really letting it sit in the body. Like I could feel like I felt like there were pockets in it, um, like air bubbles even, and that is where there is a lack of adherence. There's a lack of cohesion. Um, this Two of Hearts is very much reconciling that. So we all have the capacity for that. It's just likely in the things that we're avoiding. It's just likely in the things that we are neglecting or suppressing or hiding for guilt or shame or what have you. Maybe a lot of this isn't like the things we need to fix, but the things that you need to be honest about. And some of that isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes it's just that, like, you've been creating, that you're actually a writer, that you're actually a singer, or whatever it is that maybe is unexpected or a different path than people would have assumed, but is actually a very whole or true part of you. So that you can see yourself in full view rather than see yourself in costume for one role or another, one role or another. Hello. 10 of clubs is, I think, very akin to that whirlwind energy and the ways in which we can construct or direct, but the ways in which that we can build that as well. So while there is this sort of air quality to it, there is very much a resistance to outside air or wind forces. There is very much so not being swayed by forces unlike itself, which is a key point in being able to access astral realms and not in fear of the bad things, because you are in such a trusting place of your energy and where and what its desires are, that these other things uh, just don't match with you, or just don't ride or thrive on the same frequency as you, so that they become a non-issue. And I've seen it in action. Um, I think that's very much why people, especially with this Pisces energy, perhaps have night terrors or very vivid dreams that aren't very pleasant, and so they suppress the capacity to dream, or uh, and suppression of capacity to dream can be as simple as not remembering your dreams, because your mind isn't considering that important or valid information. Um, but beyond that, uh, astral projection and lucid dreaming is often regarded as a key tool in being able to heal and reconcile and move outside of night terrors and night panics and nightmares. Um, so, what did I say about that again? Uh, 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 things not unlike me. That's what it was. It was a story. It was visual. Um, I often dream very vividly, and there's been periods of time when I've very much had these feelings and these realizations that there's something else sort of in our dreams, and I definitely tap into that in Qualities of Power, Powers of Quality. But it was unreal. It was like like the first scene in The Walking Dead where the dude's on top of the car and there's just zombies everywhere, and it's like me in my bed, and then there's just spirits everywhere, like lurking up, like, "Are you falling asleep? Because now I can get in." And so I did my nightly ritual, I suppose. Dream affirmations, much like the gateway key, much like a tantric invocation. Um, the gateway key, or more than your body, because your body is more than matter. Da, 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 but that you are. I have it right here. I don't know why I'm trying to remember it. But that you are capable of learning this information and moving with it, and that you are guided and protected by entities like you, and with similar intentions. But if you've done my meditations, I sort of tweak that and amend that to being, guided and led and protected by ancestors and entities like you, or with frequencies like you. In which case, you are not afraid of the other things. You are not negating the other things. You are merely in a pure and trusting place within you that those things no longer have similar interests and no longer have the capacity uh, to equalize charges and like penetrate your cell wall realistically and in a like cellular biological kind of way. And if that wasn't enough of a surmise for you, again, go to my meditations. You can find my own. They are for free on YouTube, or for free in my meditation library on my website. But also Gateway Experience, Gateway Key. Get very familiar with it and devise your own so that it's easier to remember, because it's like actually like a pretty hefty paragraph. King of Wands is very much exactly that. Is very much exactly that. Devise your own. It is very much Emperor kind of energy, very much Hierophant kind of energy. Devise your own, whether that be plan, whether that be method, or whatever it is. That's not to say reject everything else around you, because again, that's a whole new world of suppression. But that is to say, define your key terms and the applications of. It's like rhetorical analysis of the world around you. And you know what? Neurodivergents might be very familiar with that already, and are already actively doing it constantly, which is why people like us, and have maybe have a different kind of experience interacting with people that don't acknowledge those things, that aren't curious about the ethos, pathos, and logos of the way the world moves. But that is not because it's not there. It is, in fact, in everything, even in video games. Uh, a triangulation, much like that. Oh, that's not a triangle. Is how they design characters, is how they develop stories, is how they develop the bosses that you beat. And itself has an algorithm of weak points and of change points, and is often the perfect pockets and the perfect moment toward change, which is how we get to beat them at all. I love that. King of Wands is rocking and rolling. And again, R.I.P. Ozzy, but that's God, that song. It's like rock and roll rebel. They think I'll worship the devil. Something, something, something. But listen to that song and get right with it, because that's very much this King of Wands, or what this Queen of Pentacles, Queen of Wheels energy, the offering of the Queen of Pentacles, is what the King of Wands upholds, and what the Hierophant or the Emperor protects. And I bring up those cards because they've been very thematic lately. And came up in another reading. So they tie to this quite thoroughly. And perhaps you may even see it outside of this because these are all catalyst experiences. And it's always interesting to see how these messages unfold like deconstructed origami in clearer and clearer catalytic messages for people, including myself. Absolutely, including myself. Uh, it's it's all quite fascinating, really. Ugh. I know we've breathed through these cards already, but bear with me. Do a little breathing with me because what I think is happening is a lot of this is ego energy taking precedent, suppressed spiritual energy, and an unclear mind. So we're going to strive for a clear mind, strive for patience, strive for slowing the heart rate, um, check the ego, and allow for spiritual energy to make space. We don't have to fill us with things. We can relieve some of the pressure so that we can not take on more, not hold more, but be clear about what it is that we are holding. In the same way that you like drain a pool to clean a pool. What else did I say? Oh yeah, relieve the tension, relieve the pressure, because we also have 10 of Wands here, and that's very much tight storm, or like fireworks in a fucking garbage can. There's a lot going on. So we check the ego, and we relieve space for a clear mind. And so breathe with me a little bit, yeah. Chances are you're not breathing through your nose consistently, in which case you always inhale through the nose. And you feel the throat open up and space sort of expand there so that you can hold it here. And in exhaling through the mouth, you can feel a more fine-tuned, more laser-like releasing of that air. So perhaps it expands and impresses your ideas of your capacity from before. But also you'll find that it is cooling intake and a warming, comfortable exhale or outtake, and can be quite filling in the body, even though we're also acknowledging space. It's like the way vibration fills a room that echoes. There may be, nothing in it because we're clearing space, but there's so much magnetism in the air with vibration, and where vibration can really bounce back and forth to. So if we were to turn the body into a temple chamber in that way, then that is a breath that can lead you toward that. In which case, the body is a temple, and we can pray to ourselves, with ourselves internally, and clear space in the mind so that we can move more freely in the world, and with honor to our own sacred capacity in that movement, rather than understanding yourself as sin, or understanding yourself as lack, or understanding yourself as shame or guilt to hide or be hidden. So, with all of those thoughts and ideas being addressed, get comfortable, find where your body however that may be. Maybe that's sitting, maybe that's resting perfectly against whatever chair you're in, maybe that's laying down with a pillow underneath your lower back so that you can feel a little bit more expansive. Sometimes I'll even tuck my hands behind my head, something that I learned when I did have really bad asthma, because it widens the lungs, although I do feel like it compresses in a different axis. But it feels like I can take in more. With all of that being said, breathe in through the nose, allowing your throat to widen and hold that air in that space. And exhale, preferably twice as long or as long as you can go through the mouth. Notice the cooling sensation as the air passes through the nostrils. Notice the fullness in the throat when you hold that breath. And notice the calm, warming, even sensation of releasing that breath in twice as long time. What I mean by that is, say you inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we'll hold that 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At the end of the day, it has less to do with the numbers and more to do with your experience of time expanding rather than compressing. Maybe we take in the ideas of compressing, disregard time, hold, and we just exhale like we're trying to stretch a spider web as far as it will go, like we're trying to roll dough out without any tears or holes, which even that creates for more rising dough. Okay, I let you follow that. Go on to yourself and continue to breathe. And when you find yourself enraged, please take the time to slow your heart down, to slow your breath down, so that you can move with that rage in an honorable way. We can honor those feelings. We can move with those feelings. They are feelings that are necessary. They're not feelings that we can disregard. They're not feelings that need to be suppressed. They are feelings that need to be dealt with or reconciled. Same for your ambiguity, your ambivalence, and your anxiety. It only draws you farther away from the self. It's not an issue of whether or not we are allowed to be angry or sad or enraged. It is entirely up to and about what we decide to do with that. Will you break more? Will you hurt more? Will you bleed on others? Or will you tend to the wounds so that healing can actually take place? And until next time, I appreciate you very much. Questa